Today at Let's Talk Marketplace,
we discuss about the insane growth rates of Shein in Europe. And with Amazon vendor consultant Martin Heubel and me, you will get a deep dive into Amazon's annual review meetings, how you can prepare your negotiations and to get the best out of it. Have fun listening.
Let's Talk Marketplace.
The Marketplace podcast with Ingrid Lammer and Valerie Dichtel. Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk Marketplace. Today it's just me, Valerie, at the mic. My dear co-host Ingrid asked me to take over this recording because she is at the hospital right now with her son who had a small bike accident. Nothing too serious, thank goodness, but as recording a podcast from a hospital room is not ideal, which is why I'm covering for her today. So life happens, as we all know. That's the reason why we are two co-founders. And the other one can always jump in if one is not able to do the podcast today. So, but you still don't have to listen to me monologuing for an hour because I have a great guest waiting in the ranks. And it's someone diehard fans of our podcast already know, Amazon vendor consultant Martin Heubel. Martin, it's great to have you back on the show.
Hi, Valerie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me back. Really excited for this one today.
Yeah, I'm also really excited, Martin, because last time we saw us was at the Marketplace convention, where you also already talked about the Amazon annual review meetings. And this is also our topic of today. I'm quite excited about that because Martin and me, we were ex-Amazon colleagues, actually. I'm not sure that we have been there at the same time, Martin, right?
I think we have been. I was in Germany, so in Munich from end of 2016 to 2018, so end of 2018. But we never crossed actually a path, have we?
Yeah, no, because I was always Amazon vendor fashion.
Yeah, and I was only in the home houseware space. So we were actually in separate buildings, weren't we?
But just across the street. So, yeah. But we have both this vendor manager background, and that's actually the perfect place for you to be here to learn from our insights, and especially from Martin's insights, because he's really very deep into this topic. So last time you were here with us, we discussed the latest big vendor clear out, where Amazon threw hundreds of smaller vendors and brands from the vendor program with a very short notice. And the deadline on which those brands had to leave the vendor program was November the 9th. So just a few days ago. How were those last weeks for you, Martin? What did you hear from brands regarding this cleanup?
Yeah, I mean, there's always something new with Amazon, isn't there? In their latest update about terminating small vendor accounts, I think what we've really seen over the last few weeks is that very small vendor accounts that don't have a large stake and also do not really contribute much to Amazon's overall growth in that category were mostly affected by it. And we've also learned since then that these termination letters weren't actually a one-off, but came in several waves, with the latest one just happening last week, where Amazon is almost using these termination letters on a rolling cadence to inform more and more small brands, usually below $1 to $2 million right now, also here in Europe, about their termination from the vendor program. Now, as we discussed also in our podcast last time, right? I mean, this doesn't mean that you cannot sell on Amazon anymore, but effectively you are booted out of Vendor Central.
So this wave is turning longer than expected, right?
Yeah, you could almost say it's going to be the new reality. And if certain brands cannot deliver the growth or fall beneath their growth potential from how Amazon sees it, Vendor Central will be increasingly becoming exclusive to those larger multinationals who are carrying really category relevant selection. And thereby Amazon has a high interest of also owning their inventory and ensuring that the prices are very sharp, as they would say. Because of course, with inventory ownership comes also the opportunity for Amazon to price the products very competitively for the end shopper.
Okay. So I would say there's enough reasons for vendors to be very aware about their growth potential. There are also annual review meeting. But what would you say is like, if I am a vendor and I have annual review meetings, then I don't have to be afraid that much?
So if you've been invited by your vendor manager to actually start the annual vendor negotiation process, it's very unlikely that you're going to be affected by it, simply because you have a designated account manager who's sitting on the other side. And they've also already allocated the resources onto your account to plan the targets for your vendor negotiation. I mean, let's make no mistake. Vendor managers don't wake up one day to the other and just say, okay, great, let's start a negotiation. Well, this is all well planned out months ahead before they even get in touch with you. So if you have the invitation already, then great, you're probably out of the woods. If you haven't gotten the invitation yet, but you still have a vendor manager, also here, the probability of getting booted out of Vendor Central is fairly low. But as you rightfully say, Valerie, I think it's one of those kind of mitigation factors that you need to keep in mind whenever you're severely declining in your sales growth year over year, or where you haven't necessarily been able to cross the 1 million annual revenue mark over the last 6 to 12 months.
Okay, so I would say, first of all of you who have an annual review meeting already planned, you can like breathe in, breathe out, and listen to our podcast in fully and learn how to prepare for it. What tips and tricks we can give you today and Martin. But before, for those who didn't listen to our last episode with you, a very short intro from you, why I'm talking about with you about vendor negotiations, Martin.
Yeah, sure. So for anyone who doesn't know me, hey, my name is Martin Heubel. I used to work at Amazon for around 5 years, as previously highlighted, from 2016 all the way to 2021. First 3 years I was in Germany, managing brands in the home houseware space. And then later onwards, I took responsibility in consumer goods categories, particularly in the categories of grocery. So those confectionery categories and vendors who carry a lot of chocolate, a lot of crisps, which was very interesting to see because I really got a good glimpse into both worlds of Amazon, right? So heavy and bulky products, as well as then very low priced products, oftentimes priced at only $1 or $2 or euros. So very difficult from a profitability standpoint for the online retailer to make more sustainable. And then I transitioned roughly 3.5 years ago into my role as an independent consultant, where I now help first-party vendors better match their reality to the operational reality when it comes to Amazon.
Okay, wow. So I would say, to conclude this, Martin is really the perfect match for a nice conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it. On how to negotiate with Amazon to be prepared for the annual review meeting. But before we do that, let's have a quick look at our partner, Channel Engine. So, who is Channel Engine? Channel Engine is a marketplace technology service provider that was founded in the Netherlands in 2013, but now operates throughout Europe as well as in the United States, Canada, Australia, Singapore, and Dubai. I like to call it marketplace middleware or marketplace integrator. Channel Engine makes it easier for its customers to grow faster on marketplaces. With their help, brands and retailers can connect to over 950 different online marketplaces and social commerce platforms worldwide. And new connections are added almost every week. The platform also offers automated processes for product listing, assortment management, fulfillment, and repricing. Since a recent acquisition, Channel Engine also offers many functionalities for brands that are active in marketplaces in the hybrid model, both as a 1P wholesale partner and as a 3P marketplace seller. Channel Engine's customers include brands such as Unilever, Emma, and Sonos. Due to the unusually large number of marketplaces connected, Channel Engine has a wealth of data in terms of marketplace business. Ingrid and I regularly use this database and the detailed studies and white papers from Channel Engine for our research, for our deep dives. And it's also one of the data sources for our marketplace quadrants. Channel Engine is also a great sparring partner for topics regarding marketplace profitability. And some months ago, I held a webinar on this matter together with their growth expert, Twan Rotten. You can check out the recording on our website. We will link it in the show notes. So these were some short notes on our sponsored Channel Engine. And now let's look at the news of last week. Martin, I would be very happy to hear your thoughts on our Newsflash.
Newsflash.
So many news about Amazon. But first of all, I have this breaking news that Shein has presented its annual figures for Europe. And according to these, the platform recorded a whopping 68% sales increase in 2023. The Ireland-registered European entity of Shein has reached a turnover of 7,608 billion euros. Profit after tax has more than doubled to 99.5 million euro, which is crazy. In my opinion, I really have to be honest. I always thought Shein is coming and they're still growing and they're still growing. What the heck? So, wow. I was looking in the details and they are already bigger than Zalando, H&M and Zara. And So how do you see Shein shine?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. I think I always group Shein, Temu, TikTok Shop a little bit together. Probably it's not the right way to always look at it that way. But I think if you're looking at the wider trend, we are seeing a little bit of a repetition of the early playbook from Amazon, where they really doubled down on a few separate categories to then expand later their portfolio and their selection. And I feel especially Shein is doing that right now. I mean, they've seen phenomenal growth, obviously. I mean, if they're just kind of growing their sales by 60% for the full year of 2023, I mean, good luck kind of beating those numbers from a marketplace perspective if you have quite a significant growth and sales base already, right? It's easy to do that on a low sales base, but based on what we just heard, I mean, this growth is certainly unheard of almost. And the last time you may have seen this domestically is probably from Amazon. So very interesting. And also I think brands need to kind of increasingly become aware of this factor that, of course, even though they may not sell on these platforms, I mean, there comes a point where resellers, distributors, wholesalers will look at this opportunity and say, okay, hey, why don't I actually sell on those marketplaces? Even though I may not be the authorized brand. And I think this will kind of create a lot more friction down the road that a lot of brands in Europe are not necessarily aware of.
Yeah, I think that too. We also investigated a few weeks ago and at Shein's different country pages, and we realized also that many Western brands are already sold on Shein's different. For example, we found Adidas in Switzerland, for example, and. I think also, like you said, many of the brands are not aware that they are already got sold there. And sometimes I have the feeling it's a bit like 10 years ago at Amazon, where when I was a vendor manager, they were and I was at a trade fair and wanted to say hey, can we sell your products as a brand, from Amazon? And they were can you please leave our booth? And I was
I remember those conversations.
Yeah, me too.
Dreadful.
Yeah. And I could imagine that for Shein, it's the similar case. And they are really growing insanely, and they really have also the background to push even more in the future. So let's see how this will evolve. But I would say we should really, especially in the fashion business, keep our eyes there and also have an answer ready if we want to sell there, if we don't want to sell there, and how do you want to deal with it? I think that's quite important.
I totally agree. And I think just maybe to add to that thought, I'm always a big kind of promoter of understanding your distribution control. And I think what a lot of brands need to become to realize is Amazon is a mirror of your distribution strategy, but Amazon was just the first one to be that. Now Shein, Temu and the others are going to become that and will make this issue explode even further if you're not controlling your distribution and you continue to sell to everyone and giving them large discounts. Because guess what? These discounts by savvy sellers who are willing to kind of undercut your margins will be willing to kind of continue giving these discounts and pass them on to the end shopper.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is cross country and global as well. So we found, for example, definitely soccer tricots and dresses for in Switzerland from Adidas, which were supposed for the Chinese market. So really be aware about that. Yeah, there's like always a way. Yeah, this is global connected, everything. So you will always find a way.
We'll be having a roller coaster of the next 5 to 10 years ahead of us.
I guess so too. Yeah. Okay, next news. And now it's like very Amazon focused. Amazon has revealed the start date of its Black Friday week. This year it starts as early as November 21st, earlier than before. Any thoughts about the Black Week, Martin?
It's an interesting one. I think Amazon is in dire need to kind of extend a little bit artificially maybe this year, the kind of period, simply because it tends to start a little bit later. If you're just looking at the typical Black Friday and Cyber Monday dates itself. So of course, I mean, I think what we've seen over the last few years already is that Amazon extends their promotional calendar quite aggressively, almost up to the last day of Christmas. And I think with their recent push towards improving their footprint towards same and next day delivery, this will be pushed towards Christmas even further. So even if you wake up maybe on Christmas Day, if you're living in a large city and Amazon has certain products available for same day shipping, you may not be too late to get your Christmas shopping done. And I think starting early is great to kind of capture on all of these kinds of attention of shoppers that want to get their Christmas shopping out of the way. But I think they're extending more and more towards both sides. They're starting earlier and they're also increasing their offer closer to actual Christmas Day.
Yeah, which leads me to the next topic. Amazon is also changing its targets for sellers for the Christmas season. So between November 17th and January 11th, different delivery speed requirements and different thresholds apply to products with the Prime logo. So this is also as an add-on to exactly this topic of being faster, but also maybe more, I would say, delivery friendly also to the sellers, because I think also it's sometimes really, really hard to meet all the thresholds in Christmas season.
Totally.
Yeah.
And especially, I mean, if you're looking at it, I don't know how you're seeing it in Germany right now, but I keep hearing it from my clients that they have considerable headaches trying to get their orders delivered to Amazon warehouses because they're simply at capacity. It's the same for mainland Europe as well as for the UK for certain warehouses. Amazon gives, of course, rerouting directions and opportunities, but even they start to get close to their capacity limits. So I think vendors that have a direct fulfillment or vendor flex setup and they can send the goods out of their own warehouses are in a slight advantage here. But yeah, you're fully right. I mean, if you're a seller, of course, you're not necessarily able to get your pallets picked up by DPD or DHL. And I think it's right what Amazon does here to extend a little bit more mercifully, so to say, their delivery deadlines. In the end, I mean, Amazon can display it quite agile on their PDP, right? What the supposed delivery date shall be.
Yeah. And I also realized this when I bought some products at Prime Day in October. It took much longer than usual to get my parcels, to be very honest. I think it took 3 days, and I'm really living in Munich city center. So it's, different than,
I think Amazon is in growth mode, clearly, right? I mean, great upside potential for the future, but in the short term, it really kind of creates these bottlenecks where I think we all have to deal with somehow.
Yeah. Okay. I would say that were all of our news today. Let's talk about Amazon vendor and annual review meetings. But before that, just a quick word on our sponsor, Text2. So if you are selling cross-border on Amazon, you might have already heard about an important change. From November 1st, the Amazon VAT compliance service provider Avalara has terminated their contractual relationship with around 30,000 European Amazon sellers. Anyone who has not noticed this now needs to take immediate action, as they will certainly be late with reporting for this month in countries such as Spain, France, Italy, and Poland. We'd ask our sponsoring partner Text2 about the right course of action. Their answer: those affected must act immediately and look for a new provider. The move can take place within a few weeks with an existing actual ID. Even this happens a little later than November, you could still make up the notification for November. If you are looking for a new VAT compliance service provider, Text2 might be an interesting option for you. Text2 offers a comprehensive platform for online retailers who need to carry out legally compliant and efficient VAT reporting and accounting processes. The software analyzes all sales, fees, and payments, creating a transparent and audit-proof solution. With Text2, retailers can automate the accounting and VAT processing and seamlessly transfer data to Dativ. Text2 is not only a specialist in submitting VAT returns on time for you in all pan-EU countries, but also corrects or reports retroactively if something has gone wrong. And they cover not only international VAT challenges on Amazon, but also on eBay and Zalando. If you want to check them out, have a look at our show notes or write Johnny Hofberger from Text2. So now, Martin, as we're already talking about Amazon a lot, let's now hit to our main topic and consider the Amazon annual review meeting strategies for those pesky vendor negotiations every vendor manager is so much looking forward to. Not. Topic of the week. So I'm so glad I did all the jingles right into place. As usually Ingrid is doing this. But today it's just the two of us. And I'm really looking forward to this talk, Martin, because we were both Amazon vendor managers back then. So we were both on this dark side, as I sometimes now used to say. And which helps me a lot in understanding the brand's problems or what they tell me. When I was a vendor manager, I was like in my beginning 20s, I think like 22, 23, when I started as a vendor manager. And then they were like, hey, and there was like this, I mean, I'm not so tall, right? I was like this tiny blonde young girl. And then they were like, yeah, now, Valerie, you need to prepare the annual review meeting with your big Amazon fashion vendors for some million euros turnover. And I was like, okay. And then it was like, now let's do this in English. And I was like, okay. And you know what I did too? That I was always super aware that that I need to look very serious. So I always had like high shoes on and my glasses. I wear my glasses always.
Yeah, talk about cold water experience, right?
Yeah. But to be very honest, I had a really great boss back then, and she really taught me so well in negotiations. And I would say if I wouldn't have done at this place with this boss, thanks to Eva, by the way, I wouldn't have learned so well to negotiate. But from my perspective, annual review meetings at Amazon, they are really tough. And they can get really nasty if you are not well prepared and if you don't know what to do on the vendor side and on the vendor manager side. And that's actually what we talked today about how to not get nasty annual review meetings. So how to get the best out of it, I would say. Martin, what's your how did you came to this topic, and how does it come that you are now self-employed and still stick with this topic?
Yeah, and first of all, I had almost like the exact same experience as you did, right? You were starting at Amazon, and within a couple of days, there were some vendor managers missing in the team, or they were sick, and then you get kind of the category that you almost inherit, and where they tell you, okay, look, now you have to negotiate these 10 brands, and you look at them and you're like, okay, but is there any training available? And it's Amazon; they don't give you necessarily any effective training. To their credit, I got last minute into one of their internal trainings that they actually did run on negotiation basics. But I quickly realized there's nothing to do with the reality of dealing with large multinational enterprise brands and negotiating these trade investments with them. I mean, it is a cold water experience. You're getting pushed with your head forward into it, and you just kind of need to see how you survive. And all of this, of course, I think for you as well as for me, created such very invaluable experiences to not only understand, okay, what can you do in order to kind of convince the other side of investing into certain terms that will unlock the ideal scenario that both parties are trying to achieve. But on the flip side, what I always realized, particularly after I've been through 5 rounds of these vendor negotiations annually with Amazon, was that there's still this kind of not understanding of how these negotiations work, what trade terms really are valuable, and how you can also work around it if you want to create truly win-win scenarios. And this was one of the kind of deciding factors why I then became self-employed and saw, okay, there's a little bit of an opportunity to educate the industry and also to ensure that, those negotiations are a little bit more evenly leveled between Amazon as well as those brands. Yeah. And really looking forward to dive into it today, because I think we have some kind of interesting angle in our pockets, and very excited to get into it.
Yeah, and I can so much feel you when you tell this, because when I remember, what you need to know is that if you are a vendor, if you become a vendor manager, you don't necessarily have the background of the category. So it could be that you are this year vendor manager from toys category, and next year from fashion, and the year afterwards you move to pets, for example. And I mean, from my side, I have like this fashion background, and I always want to stay in there. But I also did like 4 rounds of annual review meeting. And for me, it was always important that you have like a win-win situation, like you said. But there's a point when you are at Amazon that you have your goals. You meet your goals no matter what. And I didn't want it to destroy my whole vendor relationships just because I needed to get my goals. And I didn't want to burn my own name, because I knew I will stay in the industry. And to be very honest, this was a reason why I left Amazon and changed the site, because I got to know many vendors, right? And I still am in contact with many of my ex-vendors, and these are still also my clients. So I can so much relate to your what you said. So I would say now changing to the lighter side. I don't know. Let's talk today about first. I would say let's do about some basics. So what is an Amazon annual review meeting, Martin?
Yeah, great question. So for anyone who is new to Amazon, you may have seen this from and with your other retailers. Amazon conducts annual discussions where they kind of pull the vendor on the side into a meeting, review the annual performance over the last 12 months, introduce you to any of their new programs and initiatives, and then table a trade investment proposal to you, with the expectation of you signing it ideally immediately, but if not, in the next 3 or 4 weeks. They do that in order to really kind of improve their kind of key metrics that they're obsessed about and obsessed with, which is typically sales growth, so typical top line improvement, and bottom line growth, as well as operational excellence. Now, that typically relates to improvements when it comes to your supply chain with them, taking out certain supply chain steps out of the joint value chain, or by simply improving what their North Star KPI increasingly becomes, which is the net PPM. I'm sure you've heard this countless of times since you're on the Amazon account. Vendor managers not only ask it annually, but also during their kind of mid-year negotiations, if you want to call them like that. But these annual trade discussions are really kind of setting the scene for the next 12 months of your joint trade, with the goal of improving sales growth as well as profitability growth for and with Amazon.
Okay. And when is the season of review meetings?
It depends a little bit in which category you are. Consumer goods brands will typically start their negotiations in the 4th quarter, so typically mid of November, early December. If you're in hardlines categories, so outdoor garden, home improvement, kitchen, small domestic appliances, and so on, they typically start with a calendar year. So second week of January, once everyone is back from their Christmas holidays. I actually don't know when it is in fashion, Valerie. When do they start usually?
Usually in fashion they start earlier, maybe sometimes already October, November, because the order season is in January, February, and there's like too much overlap time to would say. So they try to like do it in different time frames, and sometimes they even use the order season and budget for the for the annual review meeting. So in terms of like, if we negotiate like this, then you get like this budget. But if we negotiate this not, then you get less budget. That's also how to deal with it. But I think how to deal with it, we come later to it. Like now you know like what they are doing. Who is taking part in a review meeting?
So in the review meeting, you will typically be confronted with your vendor manager. It's very rare that anyone more senior takes part from the Amazon perspective. So no head of vendor manager, no category leader, no sales director will typically surface during those discussions, whether they're happening virtually or on site, simply because Amazon will reserve those stakeholders for any kind of escalation situations or when the negotiation becomes gridlock down the road. And I think this is already kind of one of the key mistakes that newbies in the industry make, right? Especially from manufacturer side. They bring typically their entire sales team, they bring a marketing and maybe their logistics team, and often even some kind of more senior stakeholder, such as a head of e-commerce or worse, a sales director, which really shouldn't be part of this kind of initial kickoff meeting, because if you're mirroring the vendor manager with a head of sales, head of e-commerce, or a VP of sales in a worst case scenario, well, then you level the seniority with your vendor manager, and you need to, in later stages, when it comes to an escalation, bring more senior stakeholders from your side to the table to meet the seniority from the stakeholders that Amazon brings to the table. So the first tip maybe here already is mirror the seniority of your Amazon counterparts. If your vendor manager is in the kickoff call, then only bring your sales or account management team with you. If they bring the head of VM and category leader into it, well, then you can also bring your head of e-commerce or head of sales.
Yeah. So if they bring a head of with you, then be aware, I would say, and be much better prepared. But we come to this later. What else would you recommend to prepare?
So I think in general, right? I mean, what's critical is to not leave the negotiation preparation up to your sales team. It's really a joint divisional effort where you need to kind of understand first and foremost your total cost to serve Amazon. This is probably the single most critical KPI that I would urge everyone in the manufacturing brands industry that is a vendor to Amazon to really identify and understand. Because it's easy to look at your cost prices, it's easy to look at your existing trade investments, but you really need to understand from your logistics as well as from your finance team, what are the hidden costs that are sitting on your Amazon ledger? Is it financial charges around pricing errors? Is it price variances? Is it unpaid invoices that accumulate to 2 or 3% of your net sales? Is it penalty charges due to a significant process misalignment between yourself and Amazon? You won't know that necessarily if you leave it up to your sales team to figure out. Yes, they can look into Vendor Central, but typically you want to have really kind of a co-joint P&L, which includes all of these cost and profit centers in one overview, ideally in one Excel table for everyone to see. And this then enables you to prepare the negotiation. So yes, of course, look at your sales growth, look at your gross margins. But most importantly, understand what really the true costs of serving Amazon are.
Okay. And if I have put this together, what other figures do I need to prepare?
So the figures that I would prepare, especially for a kickoff meeting, are typically around sales growth, with a key perspective around has Amazon achieved the sales growth that I was looking for? So if you basically said, look, we want to kind of grow to 20 million euros in 2024, where do I stand right now? And do I believe with the year to go time that we still have left that I will meet this target? If yes, great. I think we can kind of set the negotiation onto a different level. But if you're missing your growth targets, well, then you should also really review how you're going to invest going forward. Next is profitability, both from an Amazon perspective as well as your internal gross and net margin perspective. So how has the Amazon profitability performed? Was it driven due to the fact that you maybe pushed a cost increase through nationally and then Amazon's net PPM has declined? Or was it due to the fact that your portfolio mix has shifted? So you've sold more of profitable or unprofitable products compared to year over year. And you can do the same analysis on your gross margins because you want to understand whether you are in line or significantly deviant compared to your other retailers. And I think this already kind of signals one of the key important points. Don't just look at numbers and KPIs, also always have a benchmark available. And that doesn't need to be market driven. That can be comparing your margins and your total cost to serve with the typical cost profile that you are having also with your other offline and online retailers. And lastly, I would take a look at my category visibility share, category penetration or market share, whatever metric is the most easiest for you to access, and compare that to your wider market segment share that you have in the offline and online world. Now, there are two ways of doing that. I mean, first of all, you will have to look at your GfK and Nielsen data, which typically give you good insight about how high is your market penetration or your market share in any given market or country offline. And then you can look at the second part through, service providers like Profitero, or also by looking simply about how many products we have in the best-selling rank as a bestseller, whether this kind of market segment share is mirrored equivalently on Amazon. So if you have a market share of, let's say, 15% in the wider market, including your offline sales, how does it compare to your Amazon market share? Maybe it's above that, great. Maybe, and more realistically, it will sit below that, which gives you also a good indication on whether you still have room to grow or whether you're slowly but surely reaching a growth ceiling that you need to factor into your wider negotiations.
Mm-hmm. So from my experience, Amazon comes every year to the table and wants something from you, like more profitability, more budget for marketing. And now we have this topic of advertising, because what I had in my, back in my vendor manager times, it was like, hey, we will invest more money in retail media and advertising. Is this still so separate within Amazon, as they say, like, yeah, but I don't care because it's like not influencing my profitability within Amazon? Is this still so separate to see, or is this coming more together?
So I wish I could tell you that it's coming together, but it's still very separate. And vendor managers would like to also keep it that way. Now, your vendor manager from a KPI perspective will only almost look at not declining your sales growth, because that's very important to them, as well as stabilizing or improving your net PPM. And only if they are reaching an escalated situation in your negotiation where they see that there's no other way for them to improve the investments with you, they will entertain conversations about factoring in mix effects, shifting of investments from advertising towards retail or vice versa. But it's really a last resort, and that typically also requires the formal approval of a senior stakeholder from Amazon. That's typically the category leader, but more recently the sales director or European annual vendor negotiation sponsor, as Amazon calls it, who really takes a look at the broader category performance and then assesses whether they have the room to negotiate that with you on the account, or whether the category is already so much underperforming that there's no room for this kind of negotiation. Now, if you want to increase your chances or the probability of Amazon to entertaining such an approach, is if you're looking at what I always call an inverted growth pyramid. So you know specifically over the last 12 months, how many dollars have you invested in advertising and in price promotions? Thereby, you also know how much of your incremental growth year over year in 2024 has been driven by these brand-driven initiatives, advertising and price promotions. So you can reverse engineer quite easily Amazon's organic growth performance. And oftentimes you will see that this organic growth performance has been either neutral, but sometimes it has even declined year over year, which tables a very strong narrative to not only your vendor manager, but also anyone else on the Amazon negotiation table, that effectively Amazon has not provided any organic growth to your account. All of the incremental revenue dollars that have been created came out of your own pockets through investments that go far beyond the trade investments that you would typically talk in your vendor negotiations about. And if that is so, well, then you can also diffuse the demands of your vendor manager for increased co-op investments, such as in automated marketing, because clearly over the last 12 months, they have not proven or contributed meaningfully to your growth over the last 12 months.
No.
And this usually gives you a very good foundation to then escalate the need to shift investments towards advertising or media, or at least maintain your investments so that you're not giving Amazon more investments at all, and rather bridging their need for more profitability through the additional advertising investments that you're willing to make on the account. And then striking a kind of deal in the middle where you say, okay, out of the $500,000 that we are going to invest more in advertising next year, we are willing to spend $100,000 against products that are profitable for us, but also have an accretive net PPM position on our account. Because thereby you make it part of a retail relevant KPI, which is net PPM, but you do not invest more into those trade investments that clearly haven't driven growth over the past.
Yeah. And co-ops is always like a loved one from the vendor managers. Like, oh yeah, we need more co-op in marketing. And you never know where it goes through.
Two former vendor managers, they are fairly lazy and they go the path of the least resistance, right? I think that's so important to remember. Your vendor manager will always try to just reduce your cost prices or increase in auto marketing or co-op, or as we say in Germany, a Werbekostenzuschuss or WKZ.
WKZ,
Like it's the easiest path to just kind of manipulate your margin up. But it's not necessarily the right way for you. And I always encourage my clients to stay away from these kind of levers as much as possible.
And every year there's a new target which they are trying to get you. This is like usually for 1 year interesting and next year is another one. This is my it's like this year is like sconto, which is in English.
It's a quick pay discount that they want in the payment terms.
Yeah, and then what was like the last year, Martin?
So it's mind-boggling sometimes to me, right? But last year it was very much Amazon Basket. They also pushed a lot of brands towards, of course, increasing their subscribe and save investments as well as the Amazon Vendor Service investments. So they targeted, I believe, like 50 basis points across most brands that I worked with as an absolute minimum. And this year, what I've seen so far is they don't necessarily have new initiatives and programs. They're recycling a lot of what is already there. One of the key initiatives is, Valerie, you will know this, retail merchandising, which they have rebranded as banner campaigns, including brand blasts, which basically means that Amazon not only shows your products in banners on their category detail pages, but also will send a notification to the end shopper that some of your products may be on deal or may be available on a dedicated landing page. So various results so far, but not really great ROI.
Do I ever get actually analytics about it? Because this was always the thing, right? Yeah, like you negotiate something and then,
Yeah, they've become better about it, but it still significantly depends on who you have sitting on the other side. So vendor managers will typically not entertain giving you any performance benchmark report or pull it out of the system because it's still fairly manual for them. Brand specialists will typically give you an overview, but oftentimes it lacks depth. So they will give you, okay, there was an upside in traffic and conversion during that time frame where your banner campaigns were launched. But let's be real, this could have been done and kind of created due to your advertising campaigns or A and B tests that you would have had run at the same time on your PDPs. So there's no revenue attribution really towards these banner placements and brand blasts.
Yeah. So would you recommend to bring your needs also on the table in terms of like, okay, Amazon, what do I need from you in order to perform better? And also, what can I as a brand or seller bring to the table, which is supporting my vendor manager? It doesn't always need to be profitability because, I don't know. What would you suggest?
So first of all, it's I think incredibly important to avoid the mistake of thinking that Amazon will work with you and for you. I know a lot of brands whose default position to the annual vendor negotiation is, let's just wait and see what they propose, and thereby we will counterposition our response based on their proposal. Now, this positions you for almost failure with guarantee because you're letting your vendor manager set the framework for all of the upcoming vendor negotiation process and cycle. So my recommendation is typically be very frank and open and transparent about what you want to get out of the AVN, and don't shy away from communicating this from the get-go, meaning the negotiation already starts when you set the agenda and the calendar invite for this kickoff meeting. Whether it's in person or virtually, it doesn't matter. But make sure you negotiate at least 30 to 45 minutes into this kickoff meeting where you present your side of the story and how you review and assess the performance of the Amazon account over the last 12 months. So don't wait for Amazon to make the first table the proposal, but also come up with your own proposal that you then present to your vendor manager, because that really sets the frame for all of the negotiation discussions later onwards.
Yeah, always good to be the negotiation leader, right?
I fully agree.
And what would you say is like a successful annual review meeting?
A successful vendor meeting is typically related to not only talking about, a little bit the outputs, right? I mean, everyone wants to talk about sales growth. Everyone wants to talk about how we are stabilizing net PPM, at least vendor managers do. But I think we have to scratch beneath the surface. That means that, let's take an example. You want to get a better return on investment from AVS. Now, this is an output, right? This is the end state that you would like to achieve. But if you're just basically saying this and stating this to your vendor manager as part of the negotiation, you're not putting in place the mechanisms or the ways to increase the likelihood of achieving this outcome. So you need to kind of go the extra mile, because your vendor manager won't do that for you. And tell them, for example, that, look, we're willing to maintain our investment into AVS, which, by the way, we may not be happy with, because last year, 10% of our portfolio was suppressed on average at any given time. We require that certain predefined business critical tasks get responded by within 48 hours by our brand specialist to maintain this investment going forward.
Yeah.
Now, your vendor manager will not like to hear that. Still, they also have to achieve their negotiation targets. So you need to leave these kinds of end state negotiations and discussions, and you need to rather focus on the inputs. They shouldn't overwhelm your vendor manager, because we all only have so much time in any given day and for any given vendor negotiation. I mean, keep in mind, your vendor manager probably negotiates with up to 10 brands, sometimes more, at the same time, right? So you're only one out of many. So pick your battles, but pick them wisely, right? If you want to drive growth, well, then talk about how you can improve stock holding together with Amazon, and evaluate whether certain supply chain initiatives can create mutual winning scenarios. A key example that we also discussed before the show is that Amazon is currently very much at capacity in a lot of its warehouses, not only here in Europe, but also in the US. So brands that can actually offer warehouses or shipping from their own warehouses to the end shopper can put themselves in a significant advantage, because they avoid sending the goods to Amazon itself. But on the flip side, they're also having significant cost savings oftentimes, because they do not need to send their goods to Amazon. And Amazon saves costs because they don't have to store your goods in their warehouses and pick and pack them there. So really focus on these inputs that drive your output. And I think differentiating between those two can really be the differentiator between a successful vendor negotiation and one where you kind of want to achieve something and you're closing the negotiation 2 days later, but you have no concrete plan on how to achieve the sales growth, and your vendor manager will only come around the corner whenever any metric is significantly off track.
Okay. So I've done my negotiations now, and I see, well, that's really a hard one. How can I escalate this whole thing if it's necessary?
Yeah, so it really depends on the individual negotiation at hand, right? Because I think it's not worth it to escalate every negotiation. But if you're significantly finding yourself in a situation where Amazon asks you for, let's say, plus 2 percentage points in terms, and you say, no, I need to get this cost increase through, that is at least 2 or 3 percentage points. So your total delta is like, let's say, 4 or 5%, and you negotiate with Amazon already since 4 months or 3 months, let's say. Well, there comes a point where you need to start ignoring your vendor manager. And what I mean by that is you need to stop talking to them, because they clearly have no incentive to further negotiate the negotiation to your advantage. It's very understandable if you kind of put yourself into their minds, because today vendor managers rotate in and out of their position within 12 to 15 months, sometimes even sooner than that. So guess what? They don't care about your account as much as you do, because you know in a year's time, you still will have to sit in the same chair and you will have to negotiate with Amazon again. So of course you are incentivized much more to negotiate sustainably for your business to not become bankrupt within the next 6 to 12 months. Now your vendor manager has not this incentive. His or her carrot in front of his or her nose is, look, I want to get promoted. Let me reach my profitability targets as easily and as quickly as possible. And if my vendor doesn't give me what I need, well, then I just block it, because effectively I can still reach my targets at the category level, even if I slow down this vendor in growth. Whereas you, on the other hand, you may not be as diversified. You may have quite a significant sales dependency on and with Amazon. So how do you go about that? The first thing that I would always recommend, even before you start the negotiation, is to have a clear stakeholder mapping in place. Who are the superiors and managers of your vendor manager? Who is the head of VM? Who is the category leader? Who is the sales director responsible for your vendor negotiation? If you can have that in place, great. If you don't have that in place, well, then try sources like LinkedIn. Approach your AVS brand specialist when you have your weekly or bi-weekly calls with them to ask them, okay, what is the name of the person that is responsible for our negotiation beyond our vendor manager? You can ask them for an org chart. Sometimes they will give it to you, especially if you don't mention the negotiation and you just say, look, we want to kind of have this information accurate internal kind of knowledge. But you can also, of course, ask your vendor manager. Most effectively, if your Amazon counterparts do not give you this detail, is to either announce that if the cost increase, for example, is not being accepted by, let's say, 1st of February, you'll no longer adhere to confirming these orders to Amazon. Because that will also then put your vendor manager under a little bit of pressure, because they will not get fresh replenished stock from you. But ideally, you want to avoid, of course, the stop ship scenario. So go the path which is a little bit more resistant, with a little bit more resistance, by asking for who these stakeholders are and actively stalking them on LinkedIn if you need to, and reaching out to them, asking whether you can have an escalation meeting with them. Typically, they will be quite happy to do that, particularly if you're a vendor who's quite relevant for their category performance as well. When you have this escalation meeting, then table your kind of point, or you table your points that you really draw a red line under. So that also Amazon knows how they can create a solution that works for both of you. In the example, if you need this cost increase, well, then offer the mitigation plans that you can give them. Maybe you let Amazon bulk up one last time at the old cost price before the new cost price is actually going live. Maybe you offer them a cost support for 2 or 3 months to mitigate the margin impact that they may otherwise face, similar to what you do with your offline retailers or wholesalers and distributors. Those are all no new strategies. One of the key metrics here in all of this that I would brands encourage to look at is how much inventory Amazon has on hold and in stock at any given point in time. Because what you will often see is that Amazon stocks up towards the fourth quarter, bulks up, has lots of inventory. Well, that then also means that your vendor manager has no pressure to return to the negotiation table if you are stopped shipping to them. So sometimes, and look, it's only a suggestion, I know it's a controversial one, sometimes it may make sense to limit your sell into Amazon a couple of months before your negotiation is about to start, so that they are not sitting on loads of inventory and also have to return to the negotiation table much faster than otherwise. And that can really make the difference between a fast or a very slow negotiation process.
And this actually is already, again, related to my own bonus regularly, right? So if I didn't met my bonus thresholds this year, then I would never do stop the sell in, right? So there's, it's really controversial. I can see it from many different aspects. Okay.
Which is why I think, I mean, it's a good time to reflect on it, right? And at least for your 2025, maybe more realistically for your 2026 planning.
Yeah.
It's one of those elements where you should already factor these negotiation scenarios into your budgeting and forecasting. Because if you know that every first quarter you're going to see a disruption, well, then plan that in. Don't plan with high kind of growth in January and February. Rather kind of have a sales recovery period from the second quarter onwards to give yourself the time, but also your leadership approval to ensure that your bonification is kind of equivalently phased across these quarters and it is aligned with the wider goals that you have on the Amazon account. Yeah.
Okay, one last question, Martin. Where do I get all those numbers from? Can I get it from Vendor Central, or do I have to do my own research? How do I get them?
So most of the KPIs that your vendor manager is going to cite in the negotiation will be available to you via Vendor Central, or also if you're using the Selling Partner API through your BI dashboard that you may be using internally. Of course, there are service providers out there which give you insights into all of those metrics as well: sales growth, net PPM, etc. Amazon has unfortunately scaled back its availability when it comes to KPIs such as lost buy box metrics. So oftentimes you'll need to complement that through a third-party service provider. I mean, there are plenty of out there. You can do your research and find probably one that is meeting your budgets and scopes that you require. But it requires a little bit of added work, yes. Worst case, if you do not have the budgets, you can ask your AVS brand specialist to send you a data pull with all of those metrics that we've just discussed earlier. The one thing that I would say is that, and that's the trickiest one to understand, is your market share or your category visibility share, because this is what you won't get from Amazon. Here you will really have to use service solution providers or market research institutes like a GfK, like a Nielsen, to kind of proxy that.
Okay. Any last word before I go to the next episode, Martin?
Yeah, I think, with all of that, right, it becomes quite clear that vendor negotiations are no easy feast. I would always caution about any quick wins that are promised to you. Do your homework, prepare, but also know what you want to get out of it, and get leadership approval and sign off for all of this very early onwards before you start the negotiation. Your biggest job is not negotiating with Amazon, but educating your internal senior stakeholders to keep their cool when you're getting towards these later phases and stages of your negotiation. Because the worst case that can happen to you is if you're standing your ground in the discussion and then your leadership team gets anxious and wants you to close as soon as possible. I've seen it countless of times derail the discussion and also getting vendors off the track, even though they have already achieved 90%. And then the last 10% stretch was taken away from them by their own, sometimes even really undereducated leadership team. So make sure that you do both. You prepare your negotiation, but you also prepare your leadership.
Yeah. And I would add to this, never say yes for the first proposal you get.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I've seen this so often. I was like, well, this was really stupid from the other side. So I was like, okay, thank you. That was easy for me as a vendor manager, but no. And then
you almost want to add another loop of negotiation just to not give them a feeling, right?
Yeah. And I remember that when I changed, I told you already, I changed to the vendor side, right? And I had some partner like this. He was like, "Oh yeah, we just agree, we don't negotiate." And then I changed the sides and I sat there with those high terms and conditions, and I was like, "Oh fuck, how should I ever get rid of them?"
Yep, I know the feeling.
Yeah. So, thank you so much, Martin, for this very deep dive into vendor negotiations with Amazon. And I think you can also really apply this to other negotiations, not just related to Amazon. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you so much for having me, Valerie, and all the best to Ingrid as well. And I'm sure we see and speak each other soon.
Yeah, I'm also pretty sure about that. And I was really glad we talked about this topic. Thank you also for covering for Ingrid. If you liked listening to us today, you could make us very happy by following us and rating our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you're listening to us. And of course, by tuning in again next time. Next week's episode is in German. There, Ingrid and me will welcome Lisa Haag from eBay, who will tell us how eBay is trying to become more attractive for brands. There are some interesting projects in the making for sure. So make sure to tune in again next time, and thanks for listening.
You listen to Let's Talk Marketplace,
the Marketplace podcast with Ingrid Lommer and Valerie Dichtel.